Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Stage Door Show. I'm Dave Hondell. Tonight, I have with me for a second time an award-winning actor, producer, and writer that has been in the business for the last 4 decades. He has over 150 international credits to his amazing resume and counting. You've seen him in hit shows in movies like The Sopranos, Ugly Betty, The Chosen, Sarah's Oil, and recently in the 2025 Samuel Golden film Hazel's Heart, which we'll explore with him tonight. So please welcome for the second time one of the nicest and most humble people in the entertainment business, Mr. Stelio Savante. Thank you for being with me again, Stelio.
Hey, Dave, love speaking with you the first time. You're extremely kind. Reading that made me feel very old, so thank you for that.
No,
I'm delighted to be here.
we're actually the same age, and I got to tell you, because some of the shows, I mentioned The Sopranos and Ugly Betty, and I mean these are some of the shows that I used to watch, all the time, and also Law and Order, which you've been on several of those, and But first, before we get into business here, I want to. First of all, tell everybody on my show what an amazing human being you are. Stelio, I had recently, I shouldn't say recently, it was actually last April already. It's been almost a year, but I had open heart surgery, and one of the people that texted me the most and checking in on me the most was the man on my show tonight, Stelio. So I have to say this publicly, Stelio, how much you mean to me and how much you got me through a really tough time. And again, you reached out to me, your prayers and all that helped me get through that toughest time of my life, health-wise. So thank you for that. I just want to, like I said, thank you publicly for what you did for me personally during that time.
That's very kind of you. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to lift up and honor friends and colleagues. So it's my pleasure and how happy I am to be visiting back with you, where we can sit here and make fun of each other's age. It's a good thing.
Absolutely, of course. And I'll be honest with you, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, I have to say that's probably my favorite decades, going through the 80s and 90s. And, there's not going to be another decade like that, now with all the technology out there. Everybody's got phones and iPads, and we grew up without that. And, to this date, I never regretted not having that. We were able to play outside with our friends and, do things, like right now you can't really do, and everybody grows up with a phone in their hand. So I think, those were great times. And, even the shows when you started acting back then, I mean, those are some of the best shows. So again, The Sopranos, what were shows like that like being on? Why do you think they're sustaining success even to this day?
Yeah, thank you. That's, the 80s is music wise. And I, of course, people from the 60s and people now will give me a hard time. They make fun of music from the 80s. And to me, it's like, how can you not like 80s music? And we came out of the great decade of films, the 70s, which a lot of people feel, and probably rightfully so, was America's and generally internationally the greatest era for films. But so many of my favorite I mean, I grew up watching Magnum PI as like an 11-year-old in
amazing.
South Africa.
Yeah.
Couldn't get enough of it. I love what you said. The biggest difference that I'm seeing working on shows now to then, easily the biggest difference, and it's especially with younger cast members, is that there's always a phone in someone's hand. You're on a set filming, they will take it with them on set, which shows, unfortunately, a pretty weak work ethic. And the second they're back at their chair, they're back on their phone. And I get wanting to take photographs of the experience, the cast we're working with, but it's taken away from what I would call sacred moments on set. And by sacred, I don't mean going before God. I just mean having the integrity to understand the art form and keeping it pure, instead of not being present so much of the time by having to be on the phone. That's been the greatest difference easily that I've noticed. I also think the way we consume has changed so much because, again, the younger generations, and I'm sure I'm going to sound like an old fart at 55, but the younger generations consume so much product on their phone. I can't stand doing that because I like to experience depth of field. I like to see framing properly. I want to be able to see supporting secondary and tertiary characters reactions, and they're meant to be seen on a bigger screen. I'm not even that
Yeah.
big a fan of streaming. I like everything old school in the movie theater, and being on that season, that specific episode of SVU was very special for me. SVU was kind of at its height. It's still soaring and thriving. And to answer the second part of your question, I think the reason so many of those mainstay shows are is because they've maintained the integrity of a pulse and beat of what's happening on the ground. Now, they will change their headlines, and Law and Order has openly spoken about basing episodes taken from headlines and current events. But the formula, the old school detective work, the way they share information has now had to sort of change because of technology, DNA, everything that we have. I mean, you can't walk a block without seeing a camera, and hopefully that means we're catching more criminals.
Right.
But there is something to be said for it. So many of the new series, to me, the series when I was growing up, there was more to distinguish them from each other. They each had something very specific and
Right.
unique to them. So many of today's shows, and there are the exceptions. My wife and I just finished watching the second season of The Night Manager, loved it. And I think there are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, they feel so similar. They're almost interchangeable. There
Yeah.
isn't kind of that old school um, interest in following one specific character and getting into the psyche of that character. Not that Law and Order did that as much because it's a little bit formulaic, but a lot of the detective and crime shows, which I love noir and I love thrillers. It's been my favorite genre since childhood. We actually consume quite a bit of the foreign, the Scandinavian noir is phenomenal. I love a lot of those shows.
Yeah.
I've watched Border Town many times over. I love that, it takes place on the border between Russia and Finland, and it's all blue collar detective work where your detectives had to think a lot more and be a lot more creative because they didn't have the tools and the privileges in the form of technology and DNA being as accurate as it is nowadays. And I feel as if I don't even know if you could make a lot of those shows now. I don't know that you
Yeah.
could.
Well, do you, I want to, you brought up something that was interesting, you enjoy watching certain shows and, as an actor and a producer and a writer, when you watch a show, do you have a hard time watching it for the entertainment value? Do you kind of notice things that maybe, well, I would have done it different here, or I like what they did here? Do you kind of watch from a critical aspect, or can you watch something for the entertainment value as somebody in the business for so long, like yourself?
Yeah, I am able to sit back and enjoy something. I am more taken with choices that certain actors made in certain roles or scenes, choices that cinematographers and directors made. And yes, there are certain times where I will wish the editors or even the actors made different choices. But I also, having been on the other side of it, know that a lot of times the best take that ends up being seen, it's not because everybody did their best work in that scene. It's because it's what they had available to them that was able to capture the best cinematography, and maybe the reverse coverage didn't work as well. I also do think that sometimes it depends how heavily invested I am in the show. If it's something that I like to watch a lot, um, I, having been on the other side of it, know what the tricks are we use in film to cheat camera. You have suspension of disbelief. So I'm not as hard on it. I'm much more forgiving of it. And so many of my friends are in the business. I root for them, and I'm happy just to support their product.
Yeah, and then also when you watch something that you didn't make again, does it give you inspiration? I guess to write something that maybe something you like on a show that you kind of go to the pad and the paper immediately and write down an idea, something that inspired you from something that you see.
It's very interesting you bring that up. Either you're onto something or you did your research because for the longest time, I had wanted to understand and have a better understanding of, from a writing perspective, a linear three arc approach to writing. It's not always used internationally as much. In South America, they like to do a lot of the triptych kind of simultaneous storylines split into three.
Sure.
Films like Amores Perros have visited that often, and they've been very successful. They're brilliant at it. Then you look at a lot of Eastern European and Asian filmmaking. It's not unusual to see them go nonlinear. And I had been very, very interested in a certain time in South Africa's history that came between the transition from apartheid into where we are now and how the international community flooded South Africa. South Africa wasn't prepared for what hit it. And my script has just been optioned by an incredibly esteemed and acclaimed producer. It's kind of, they've described it as Sicario meets Man on Fire.
Oh
It
yeah.
is South African themed. It's really Capetonian themed, so it could shoot anywhere because these days, with tax incentives, you could shoot something taking place in Cape Town in one of about 20 European cities, South
Right.
America, Australia, New Zealand. I just came back from filming in Brazil. There is an uncanny resemblance between certain parts of Sao Paulo and Rio that look so much like Cape Town. And yeah, it's not as much that I'm inspired to write because what comes naturally first to me is much more the producing and the acting first and foremost. But what I have felt is from a adapting to the material that I've written, it's always interesting to lean into choices that are original as possible.
Sure.
So you don't want to do something that's already been done. And sure, you cannot really reinvent the wheel. However, we're seeing so many of our great, great writers and directors now in the television world where each episodic almost feels like a feature, where a lot of these films have the budget behind them to land on one of our great streaming platforms. And you can see that they thought outside the box. And I know from other friends who are writers, they're constantly watching product because for them, they're wanting to see what's current. They're nervous to revisit something that hasn't been done for a while. And then the flip side of that coin is let's show you something that we know was successful that we haven't seen and moved away from. But I don't, even though I've written, I don't have the writer's brain. There's a certain genius and patience that I think comes with that. And I don't have that gift.
Well, one question I wanted as a follow up to what we were talking about earlier about watching shows and how we consume media now. Before I want to get to Hazel's heart here in a second, but one question I have for you because we talked about growing up with kids on phones now, and I talk about the TikTok society that we live in, where people consume their entertainment in short little spurts. I call it, like maybe Vine videos and TikTok
Yes.
videos and 10-second, 20-second videos. Do you think that's had an effect on people that, because I know young kids grew up with that, but do you think like older folks or people around our age or older that were used to going to the theater and consuming these beautiful movies that were 1.5, 2 hours long, and we could sit there and have no problem consuming that movie? Do you think that people now are being almost brainwashed into having a shorter attention span because of these social media platforms that they're almost addicting to have? And do you think that has affected the movie business and somewhat to have people maybe not be able to sit for a long movie versus watching short little videos? I mean, it's just a thought that I had. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's undeniable. I used to think it was a generational thing because the purists want to go and see a film and experience it with several hundred people in the dark and away from life. It was escapism, if you will. But I've been shocked the last few years where you're in a screening room or you're watching product film or streaming with younger folks. They're on their phones every 10 or 15 minutes. And what it's done, it's not only changed the consumer, it's changed the way product is written. I think the most obvious case, and they could speak to it far more eloquently than I, is Ben Affleck and Matt Damon just did a project called The Rip, and they were interviewed about it, and they talked
I
about
saw it.
the
I
old
saw
school
that.
way.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you saw the interview, how
I
they
did. Well,
talked about.
I actually saw the movie or yeah, I saw the movie, The Rip.
Yeah, and they talked about how the old school thrillers, the action thrillers, you'd have something happening prior to your inciting incident in the first few minutes that was a big action scene. Then you'd have your conclusion at the end. Now the attention span is so short. You need to have something every 10 to 15 minutes that not only reminds the audience of what the plot is so they can stay with it because the brain is used to checking out or being drawn to something else, but you have to continue to have little pieces of action within and throughout. And I know that from, so as a producer, I've taken films through distribution more recently. And what I've noticed is a pattern with distributors. And that pattern is their concern with engagement in anything that's 90 minutes or longer.
Well,
So
that's
just a
interesting.
standard film. Yeah. The reason they're concerned with engagement is they want to make sure the product is buying, regardless of the genre,
Yeah.
will help maintain that because we live in a world where reviews aren't just written by critics on Rotten Tomatoes. And let's be honest, there's a lot of folks on there that are critics that you read their review, they know nothing about film.
Right. Right.
It's their opinion, but they don't actually understand structure, format, film history. They don't understand narrative at all.
Right.
But now you've got audience members writing reviews on Prime. You've got audience members writing reviews on IMDb Pro. They'll go right to the page of the film. And we live in a world where analytics and insights are taken by every streaming platform. They say they don't, but they do.
They
They
do.
know
Yeah.
exactly when folks are checking out, and they are in the position where the bigger ones are not only distributing, they're producing. So before they even get started and out of the gate, they've got to write something that justifies why they're financing it and why folks are going to stay tuned to product there. And I also think it's very sad. I think it's made it very hard for independent film to actually find a place in the movie theaters. Cinemas, if you're sitting in any one of the big franchises, let's say AMC, and they've got 12 or 16 screens, at least 50 to 75% of them will have either a Marvel or DC comic book film
Yeah.
that's playing
Action.
because the franchises are what sells. And
Yeah.
the pure art form, the the independent film that's actual cinema, less product, less theme park ride, if you will, is struggling. It's struggling to find time because movie theaters are there for business, they're for profit,
Yeah.
and they want what's going to draw butts into seats
Yeah.
for 6 weeks, not for 1 week at like 40% per screen average. They have a bottom line. And yes, you can go to Prime and you can go to streamers, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a lot of ROI for financiers.
All right.
And that's still constantly changing. We have to see what happens now with the FCC, Netflix, Warner Brothers, HBO and Discovery being under that umbrella. That could affect it even more because Netflix and Amazon's model is all about streaming, all
Yeah.
all about it, because they are the VOD world and the streaming world has expanded so far beyond the US that subscription bases are what's important. So they have to keep filling the library
We
catalog
need
to
content.
keep getting,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
constant. I mean, it's never ending. It's
Yeah.
never ending, which
Yeah.
means it's an oversaturated pool of product for the same streamer. So your chance of getting distribution or getting a good distribution deal is getting more and more difficult, very challenging.
Yeah, for sure. But that was interesting what you said about the writing has changed because of that shorter attention span.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, is I mean that just blew me away because I didn't realize that, but it makes sense. It's almost subconsciously, for the, not the people in the business, but the people watching, they don't realize what you just said is true, but it does. It hooks, if it doesn't hook you in the first 5, 10 minutes, then they're going to move on to something else. So,
Oh yeah, I have a
yeah,
friend who's an incredibly highly accomplished writer, and he said he's never felt so empty in terms of writing. And I said,
yeah,
why? And he said, because we are now writing for the audience. We're no longer serving the character and the story. We're
right,
serving the audience. And look, acting used to be like that for television because you would be playing to the edit. You would always be acting to the edit
right.
instead of what's serving the piece and
Hmm.
allowing those moments to breathe and find themselves. You were limited. And I think as consumers now, it's exactly what you said. They have no idea how much
Yeah.
they've influenced what we're watching. And it's constantly evolving because now you throw AI into the fold.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, good luck.
That's crazy. Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. But I have to get into your movie Hazel's Heart because I saw the movie with my wife and we absolutely loved the movie. And just being from the Midwest, and we were talking about this before we started recording, but the it was a true story based on a true story. But in 1920 in North Dakota, I mean, this historic blizzard took place, but it's in 1920 obviously, so you don't have the conveniences that you have now, and you had a family, you were the father, you played the father of this family on a farm, and the kids go to a school, but you have to take a carriage, horse and carriage to get to the school, and you don't have those modern conveniences that you would have today. And this big storm takes place, and for over a full day, as a father, you're looking for your children. Who were on their way back from school, and they were having to survive for this 25 hours. So, can you give a synopsis of the film? And like I said, it was phenomenal. I really enjoyed it, and I just wanted to have you give a synopsis of the story because you're also not just an actor in it, but you're also the executive producer, one of them.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. We have been so incredibly surprised because you never know with a smaller film, and by smaller, it's an intimate film.
Yeah,
It's very personal, and between critics, distributors, because there was so much interest on the film, and audience responses, it's been tremendous because we don't have enough of these Americana true life stories with heroes and heroines we've never heard of when we should. There's so much wonderful history to tap into with this great nation, and I, as an immigrant, love it because it's what drew me to this country as a young kid. Yeah, Hazel is the true life story of Hazel Miner, uh, heroine, fairly well known in North Dakota, who has to put her life on the line during one of the worst storms in their history in order for her and her two siblings to survive when the storm happens, and her family do everything that they can to help rescue the kids. It's a well-known story locally to the point where there's a national monument. They teach her story in schools, but beyond the Dakotas, which do have, it's right next door to Minnesota, they have almost identical weather,
yeah,
but the story itself wasn't as well known. And for me, there were several things that drew me. One, I'm a father. My daughter was almost the same age as the young lady that it happened to in real life. Two, I loved Daniel's voice in the script and as a filmmaker and his preparation with what they were going to do with the effects. I loved the claustrophobic feel they gave because, as you poignantly said, most folks today can brave it out. We have the technology and advancement in order to be able to do that. Back then, you were literally fighting for your life. I mean, there was no the cavalry wasn't going to show up. It just didn't work that way. And I think that's what makes the story so unique. I think her story is tremendous because I've got to tiptoe around giving away, although people can look up the story of
right,
Hazel Miner,
sure,
but what she had to put on the line and the way she chose to counter it in those moments, to me, pretty much like Sarah's Oil, it's a David and Goliath story. And I was so excited to get on board and help her story get out there. I mean, it's one of those films that I think falls into the category of what we talked before. You really would go to the theater to see a film like this in the old days. Now, if you don't get a good distribution deal, which as an executive producer, one of the executive producers on the film, but I was the one that had the relationship with several distributors. Samuel Goldwyn loved it, and now it's available. Angel were the first ones to license it. It's on a ton of other streamers as well,
Yeah.
digital anyway. Yep.
Yeah, no, it was amazing, and you know, I think one of the things that hit home, and I was telling you this earlier, when I was a young child, we used to spend a lot of time in Iowa, and during these big snowstorms, and you know, just the thought of being lost in that, you know, it's weather is unforgiving, whether it's water, whether it's snow, whether it's hurricane, it's you know, it's Mother Nature has a way of humbling you, and you know, especially like I said back then, you know, you're in a covered wagon, and you don't have the luxuries of of a vehicle, and it really hit home. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, is it true that you used an abandoned Kmart building for some of this, and was that used as a studio, or is that true?
It is true. So Daniel, he deserves so much credit, and so do the crew. So he runs the film program department at University of Mary in Bismarck, and he's old school. And what that means is he has the ability to empower people that are great at knowing what to do with their hands. They built the set in the Kmart. I had asked in an early director conversation prior to taking the film to see the effects of how they would create the storm. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was not expecting it to be as sort of honest as it was. There was no way for me to tell. I showed one or two other friends that have been in the business even longer than me, and they, that's the advancement of technology these days is you were able to create something that you could otherwise never shoot. It would have cost tens of millions to do this in a storm. The conditions would have been impossible.
Right.
Folks would have gotten sick. You wouldn't have been able to hear anything. But yeah, that's it. You are 100% correct. We shot about 80 to 85% of the film in an abandoned Kmart in North Dakota.
That's amazing, and I love behind the scenes anything. In fact, I collect movie props, from movies that have been shot, either stop motion or miniature sets. I really enjoy miniature sets, and I think a lot of times now with technology, there's a lot of movies that don't have a need for miniature sets anymore with CGI and different things like green screen.
Yes, it's heartbreaking for those
Yeah.
artists. My friend
Yes.
Robert Skotak, he's won 2 Academy Awards. He did miniature sets for The Abyss, for
Hmm.
some of the biggest projects ever made. I think Aliens, that entire kind of discipline as an art form, as an artist, is almost gone
Yeah.
because of technology. And you'd think from one point of view that would be great because now there's those departments that digitize it. I think they're called there's a certain term for them. They're able to come in and build it digitally, right?
Right.
And they make all of it for you. But it's a different generation.
Yeah.
They've never worked with miniatures. So what happens to that entire generation of folks that would build miniatures that I loved because I've seen behind the scenes stuff as you have of how a lot of these sets were made.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And then you go and visit them. I was at Technicolor last year watching a screening of the film that was nominated. They took us through sets that used miniatures, and it blows your mind because it's some of the most successful films you've ever seen. You had no idea they were using miniatures.
It's amazing. The other thing I wanted to bring up, Sarah's Oil is another new movie from 2025, November of 2025, and it's very highly rated. And so, tell our audience about Sarah's Oil, because I know that that's another film popular film you were a part of just recently.
Thank you. Yeah. Sarah's Oil is one of the best experiences of my life, and we're very encouraged by how the industry is responding to it. We're nominated for several NAACP Image Awards. We were
Hmm.
just at the Movie Guide Awards. There's an embargo on it, so folks will have to watch the awards to know what happened.
Yeah.
But another remarkable and uncanny similarity to Hazel's heart. This is a young American teenager who had uncanny wisdom in the most adverse of circumstances, and in the face of that adversity, leaned on her faith. Sarah Rector is the United States' first Black teenage girl millionaire. Her story is a
Wow.
story that should be known everywhere, and I give Cyrus Naraste, who is a genius filmmaker, and his wife Betsy credit for writing a script that was a page turner and stayed with you way after you had gotten done reading it. She knows and has the ability to use what she has in her life at a very difficult time in the civil rights era. She believes there's oil under her land. A lot of these um, underworld characters come in and try to steal it right from under her because her land was allotted actually on a Native American Indian reservation. So she has to fight to keep what's hers. And the character that Zachary Levi plays tries to help her. But it was phenomenal because we shot it in Tulsa. We actually shot on the same Hughes Ranch that Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon had been
Oh,
shot.
wow.
And we filmed literally in the land where all of it happened. So we were in the thick of the summer.
Wow.
A remarkable film. I've got several friends in the cast from there that I know are lifelong friends. We hang out, we go to church together. We are looking to work on product together. We were at some of the screenings.
Wow.
I cannot recommend Sarah's Oil highly enough. After a theatrical run for 7 weeks, it's now on Prime. It was in the rent pay window, doing very well. I think either yesterday or today, it's now free to rent on Prime. It's very cinemagic. The locations and the cinematography is gorgeous. It's a very big kind of epic film,
Yeah.
but the story is very intimate. Young lady Nia DeSere Johnson, who plays the role of Sarah, is brilliant in it, and I think if the Academy had a little bit less prejudice against films that are slightly wholesome or have a slight message of faith in them, I think the film Naya and Cyrus and Betsy would be nominated for their writing, and Cyrus as director. It is a magnificent film, easily one of my top 10 experiences, since starting out in
Wow.
1990. I cannot recommend both of these films
Sure.
enough. Yeah.
Well, you play a character named Earl. So talk about your character in this film, Sarah's Oil.
Yeah, Earl Raskin is fascinatingly when I read the script, he read like a good old boy, and the story takes place in Oklahoma, and I felt that in discussions with Cyrus, what I could bring to it that would be far more interesting because we've seen these good old boy characters so many times. Why not have a more organic, raw experience, which ultimately was more visceral. And in my research of the time period, what I found was that a lot of folks from the Northeast, not just wildcatters, but just in general, had moved to Oklahoma for the Oklahoma oil rush
Yeah.
because there was an opportunity for work. And he's an enforcer. He's a strong arm character. So Cyrus is incredibly intelligent and highly confident as a filmmaker. He welcomes creative input.
Right.
So he and Betsy, who were the writers, were open to how I saw the character. Earl comes in and he plays the role of basically the enforcer on behalf of Garrett Dillahunt's character, who works for one of the major oil companies that literally just sucks up every piece of land and exploits it for what it's worth and then some,
Yeah.
taking advantage of the backs of the locals and the people that the land belongs to. And I loved playing the role of Earl because the artistic license and the beauty of the writing and the subtext of it was this man really thrives at goading people by being incredibly relaxed and mocking them without having to actually physically threaten them. Now, there is some of that happens in the film, but playing that character, gosh, it was so much fun because, as an actor, you get to, we're really raconteurs. We get to to take on and approach characters that are so far from anything we could possibly be in our own lives. I
Yeah.
mean, one would hope that playing these kind of criminals. And for me, I felt like a kid in a sandbox. And I was telling Kenrick Green, magnificent actor, Sonequa Martin Green's husband. Sonequa is now on Boston Blue. You'll know her from Star Trek and Walking Dead. And I was telling him our scenes together, man, I felt like we were two kids playing because that's the kind of environment that Cyrus Naraste creates on his sets. You show up prepared and you get to be raw and organic, and whatever the camera captures, it captures. Johnny Durango is an incredibly talented cinematographer, and I give the producers and distributors credit because we've had a very good run, and it's only now starting its actual free window on streaming.
That's amazing. Sarah's Oil. So everybody's got to check that out. I wanted to, as you were talking, one of the things we were on the same age, and today, at my place of employment, I hosted 12 students, high school students. They were seniors that were becoming healthcare professionals. They're about to hit college. And I was just amazed at how mature they were and at how they took their craft seriously, or their potential career in the healthcare field. And one of the things when you were talking, I was thinking, you've been in this business for so long. Did you also have a chance to mentor younger actors and potential directors? And I mean, how do you take that role? Do you just go in and do your thing and treat it as a profession, or do you also take time to mentor younger actors? And because as you know, we have a lot of younger actors and people in the business that listen, singers and all that. So how do you take your experience and kind of, I guess try to teach the younger kids the ropes, so to speak?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been blessed to have incredible mentors throughout my career. Diane Venora, the great Diane Venora, being one of them. Gary Sinise being another. You learn so much about how to conduct yourself, work ethic, treating people with respect, serving others, putting others above yourself, and me being a follower of Christ. It's paramount. And now I will often fall short of that because I make mistakes, I'm flawed. But it's been interesting offset the last few years the amount of acting schools I've been asked to speak at, everything from Bethel School for the Arts. Several years in a row, they've had me come in to talk to the graduate students. We've done it for Biola, we've done it for schools in the Midwest. And on set with younger actors, the best example you can set is just your work ethic as a professional. And then a month will go by after you've shot, and you'll get the nicest email or card, and you don't realize how much people watch what you do and they learn from it. And that means both your good and bad choices are seen. And sure, there are times on set where you take someone under your wing, and many times over the years, for a very long time, I've been bringing friends into my projects. Some of them are established actors, but some of them are younger actors or people who are not necessarily young but are new to the industry, because you want to be able to build, you want to be able to um, share your experiences, not because you're an expert, but because your experiences in the industry can help somebody else. It's a hand up, and that doesn't mean you're better than them. It actually means you're helping prepare them so that
Right.
maybe they are as prepared getting to set on the business side of what it takes to be a professional, not just what you're doing on camera.
Yeah, paying it forward for sure. I think it's important that we do shows like this, try to teach the younger, folks that are getting into the business to, do the right thing. Be nice on set, to treat the caterer, just as nice as you would the director, and just
Absolutely.
things like that, right?
Yeah, and transpo too, but there's two sides to that coin, and a lot of times it's also letting them know where they've crossed the line. The most obvious example, there's two examples I can give. One is letting them know to put their cell phone away because they aren't experienced enough to see it, but producers and directors watch everything. They are aware of what's happening. They want to see the young actor can take direction. They want to see the young actor as a pro and isn't on their phone every 2 seconds, including on the set. And, sometimes young actors, and I think it's because their parents ultimately want the best, but they end up getting in the way. They will have a momager or
Yeah.
their mom running their career on set,
Yeah.
and it's the worst thing possible. I have seen
I
for so
agree.
many young actors, and again, they wouldn't be privy to this, but directors and producers are like, we'll never ever hire that person again. They come with baggage because of the parent, or the
Yeah.
parent doesn't understand the process and crosses a line.
Yeah.
And then the child themselves instinctually wants to be able to trust, but is still being kind of micromanaged. And it can
Yeah.
cause a lot of interference. I remember working on a very, very big Disney show. And what I liked about it was they had their on-set teachers, they had their independent time, and they were able to do what they needed to do. Now, coming out of the Disney world, a lot of them go the other way, and then they want to kind of redeem because they're embarrassed of having been in something that's a child show, and they'll go completely the other way with it. That's different in terms of actual on-set etiquette. I think I think it's a fine line of respect and understanding that you have to have a process to fall back on. And that's something that you cannot teach in an acting class. I feel like certain acting classes are overrated. There's something to be said for understanding great films, great performances, why certain performances work, why certain films were great. I think that's extremely important. But acting classes, some of the greatest actors that have ever worked on film in history, contemporary and past, are just have a raw ability and work experience. And I would take that 11 times out of 10 over somebody that comes out of acting school that is not prepared, doesn't understand how to try a scene 5 different ways, is constantly needy in terms of being given, um, you know, uh, sort of recognition by the director and wanting to be rewarded and needing feedback after every take. And no professional should ever be that way.
No,
If you're not getting a note on what you're doing, it means you're doing everything right, and you've got to let go of that. So it's a very fine line, and I think there's something to be said for mentorship, but I think mentorship doesn't start on set. I think it starts prior to that.
I agree, completely agree with you.
Yeah.
That's so well said. And I think everybody that listens to this show, we get good feedback after every show. And these are young, a lot of them are young, either high school, college age, theater students or singers, and we always get some great feedback from this. And this was just an amazing conversation as always, with you, Stelio. And so I implore my listeners to check out, some of your new movies, Sarah's Oil, Hazel's Heart, and on these streaming platforms. And also just Google Stelio Savante. You'll see, you can spend hours watching some of his amazing clips. And I do that myself. And still to this day, I just love watching your work, and just an amazing, human being again. So thank you for being on the show, Stelio. And is there anything that you're working on right now that our listeners can get excited about?
Man, thank you so much. That's very kind of you, and I'm not trying to harp on anybody that's young in the industry that has a need for validation. I understand it, but that should never be what's driving a young artist. Yes, I have several new content coming out. I did a film called Stay Forte, which we shot in Tbilisi. It was a true life story of the only 3 hostages, an October 7th Israeli film that actually escaped Hamas. We shot it on the Russian border. Selma Blair, Judd Hirsch, some incredible Israeli actors, and a very renowned Israeli director. Stay Forte will be coming out in a few months.
Okay, great.
I know that the latest season of SWAT, season 8, my episode is on Netflix. It was basically the writers were very inspired by Heat, and my character is kind of the De Niro character that runs scores. I cannot recommend that episode enough. And then there's a serial killer film based on the Green River Killer that I did with David Arquette, Rainey Qualley, Vincent Carthides. It's a great cast. That'll be coming out later this year as well.
Just amazing, amazing work, Stelio, and you're always welcome on this show. And again, thank you for your time tonight. It's been an honor as usual. And my best to you, and can't wait for another conversation again.
Thank you. You and yours as well. Maybe I'll come back in a few months when Stay Forte comes out. I think that's a film you will love. Thank you for having me on, Dave.
Absolutely.